So it's been reported by many journalists and writers that the Sacramento Kings are willing to not only offer a first round pick, but also Malik Monk in that deal to acquire Jonathan Kuminga, and apparently the Warriors have turned it down. Here's every reason why they've made the wrong decision and why they should highly reconsider. We already know that Steve Kerr loves to play Steph off the ball, and Steph himself loves the luxury of not always having to be on the ball, because there's less pressure being off the ball than on the ball. The problem is, the Warriors lack a ton of ball handling talent on this roster. The next best ball handler on this team is who? Jimmy Butler? But that's not supposed to be his job. Then you have this group of Pods, Buddy, and Moody, and that's a disgusting lineup for reliable ball handling. But if you insert Malik Monk into that role, now you have a ton of flexibility. If you want to put Steph off the ball and Monk on the ball, that can work because Monk not only has a great handle, but he can also make reads. But there's going to be times where you're going to need to put Steph on the ball and Monk off the ball, and that can work as well. At that point, Monk would be completely comfortable as a secondary ball handler, operating on second side actions. This is going to relieve the immense amount of pressure that Steph is going to have to deal with on a night-to-night basis. This is also going to free up Jimmy Butler from having to be on the ball and playing out in space. Instead, he can do exactly what he needs to do, which is to be a backline defender, grab rebounds, set screens, roll to the basket, and seal a mismatch down in the block. He's going to make life easier for Jimmy. Matter of fact, he's going to make the game easier for both Steph and Jimmy, and why would any Warriors fan say no to that? But how can anyone say no to Monk's off the dribble pop? Monk is an underrated athlete at the combo guard position. I'm sure you've seen the highlights of him blowing past players and getting up off the ground quickly and throwing down mean dunks at the rim. Minus JK, the Warriors won't have that rim pressure threat from anyone else. And we already know the Warriors are notorious for not taking shots at the rim pre-Jimmy Butler. The reason why is because they didn't have good drivers and they didn't have good powerhouse players. But now if you add Malik Monk, you now have two players that can consistently get to the rim. That's going to help your shooters get cleaner looks. Monk is a great drive and kick player. He's coming off his best season assist-wise for the Sacramento Kings. Once De'Aaron Fox left, Monk had to play point guard, and he was capable of being a starting point guard. Not to mention, Monk is also a capable pull-up shooter off pick and roll. He also has some reliable short paint scoring from like the 5 to 10 feet area. And in moments where the offense is either getting nowhere or players are just scared to shoot, Monk will not hesitate to get his game off and take shots in those moments. He's that natural scorer player archetype that the Warriors need in certain games where Steph and Jimmy don't have it. He's that talent upgrade that the Warriors don't have at that 2 position. But what Monk is going to have is his matchup on an 82 game season, because any team that plays the Warriors is going to have their best defender guarding Steph. He's usually going to have a very physical / quick defender on him. Then Jimmy is likely going to have the second best defender, a strong or stocky player down at the block. But Monk is going to have the third best defender on him. That's going to be a huge advantage for him because most defensive teams only have 2 good defenders that they can employ. There's usually not a third defender that's good enough to slow down the other team's third best player. And given the fact that Monk is a competent third option scorer, and he has some athletic traits that can really give his matchup problems, I'm willing to bet on the fact that he's going to dominate his matchup on most nights. In my Pods video, I mentioned how Steph would carry the load offensively and do enough for the Warriors to be in position to win games, but they can't close it out because nobody could offer any little additional firepower to help Steph. Well, if you add Monk into that conversation, that likely wouldn't be a problem. He can certainly do that because his job isn't to score 20 plus points, but rather if he can give you 15 or maybe even 10 points consistently, that's good enough for the Warriors to get over the hump in certain clutch games. Whereas before, when they wouldn't have that, they would lose a lot of clutch games. Now, I do get the defensive and the size concerns. Monk isn't a great defender, but given his athleticism, I think he can be capable enough to do his job and make things just tough enough for certain guys to help him. And where does that help come from? Well, if we land Al Horford, that means we're going to have a front line of Jimmy, Dre, and Horford. I think that's a pretty damn good defensive unit that can mask some defensive issues that Monk might have. On top of that, we supposedly also have a handshake deal with De'Anthony Melton, who adds that defensive depth to the guard position. So based on all of that, I think acquiring Monk will be just fine. Matter of fact, I think it's the move. I think he's surrounded by enough good defensive talent that even though he might not be a great defensive player, if he can just be okay, I believe things will be just fine. But it's a shame because the Warriors aren't fond of players that are natural scorers or talented players, and what they favor more are role player depth. Guys that can fall into a certain role and be great at it, rather than being great at scoring the ball. I mean, they had Jordan Poole, and there were times where they didn't even trust him. And all of this might explain why they might not want to move off of Moody or Buddy to get a guy like Malik Monk. But again, I think that's the wrong decision.